Well, our guest speaker today is Emily Chang, and I'm so excited that Emily is joining us. Emily has a ton of experience. She's the former Senior Vice President of Marketing at Starbucks. She's been a strategic business leader, has over 20 years of experience. Before Starbucks, she was the Chief Commercial Officer for IHG in Greater China, where she was responsible for all commercial functions across Greater China, looking after over 320 hotels, an extended team of over 5,000 members. She also built a high-performance marketing team with Apple in Asia Pacific, and she first developed her marketing and brand expertise at Proctor and Gamble. Amazing experience, but also an amazing heart and so much energy and passion. But Emily, we're so excited that you're with us. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to hear more from you today.
Thanks, Dennis. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well, and thanks for joining us today. As we transition to the slides that I prepared for Dennis, you'll see that I've titled this talk, The Turning Point. Now, the reason I picked this title is I was looking at Chinese, so I'm Chinese American, and I think it's always interesting to understand the root of words and to understand where they're coming from. And in Chinese, different phrases are constructed by putting characters or words together. If we go to the second slide, let's talk about the Chinese phrase for crisis. It's wei ji. Now, on the left, the word wei translates to danger, and on the right, the word ji translates to turning point. When we look at this combination, we really are at this point right now, right? In this crisis, this pandemic, we are facing danger every day. I think one of the biggest challenges of the pandemic is people are dying. People are stressing themselves to take care of those who are sick. And that really is danger in its truest definition. But G gives us an interesting perspective on crisis. It's a turning point. This is a place where we have the opportunity to look at a number of potential outcomes. So for us individually, wherever we are, how do we think about this turning point? Let's go to the next slide. I have 3 questions that I think we can ask ourselves. The first one is, what is God saying? The reason I picked this picture with a little bubble is I think of it as a dream cloud. Let me tell you a quick story. In December, I was really privileged to be in a position where I had 2 job offers. One option was to work for a really big company, reporting to an incredible believer, a total privilege to be given this opportunity. The other role was working in Silicon Valley for a smaller startup. And I would say my heart was probably in the first one initially, but my husband and I both felt called to the second one. And that's one of the ways we feel like God communicates with us, is when we have alignment, as we both pray and come to the same conclusion. So with a deep breath and a big gulp, I walked away from the big job opportunity and accepted the smaller one in California. That had me commuting between Seattle and California weekly, because we agreed to let my daughter finish out schooling back when we had school. And this is the really interesting thing. The very first week that I started my commute and my new job, I had one of the most vivid, lucid dreams I've ever had. I woke up and I heard God's voice saying, "I'm leading you into the desert. I'm leading you into the desert." Whenever God repeats himself, whether it's Saul, Saul, or Samuel, Samuel, Martha, Martha, something big's coming. And God just kept repeating this statement to me. So I thought, okay, I've got it. To the point where I woke up, and even as I woke up, I still heard his voice saying, "I'm leading you into the desert." I've never had an experience like this before. My husband was lying next to me, and he said, what's going on? Why do you have that look on your face? And I said, "He's leading me into the desert." I didn't know what it meant, but God knew, and he knew exactly what he needed to say to me to set my expectations for the unexpected. I started work, and I thought, is this the desert? I met my teams, and I thought, are they like the Israelites in the desert? I really didn't know what he meant, but my radar was up. And it's a good thing it was, because 15 days later, I was laid off because of the coronavirus and the impact to our supply chain. I think a few years ago, if this had happened, I would immediately have turned to Lord and said, why? Why did you call me to this job? Why is this happening? Why couldn't I have taken the other role? Did I hear you wrong? And, I think the more I get to know God and how he works, I realize he has a plan. It may not be the way I would envision it. It may not be the most comfortable for me personally, but it's part of a greater vision. And that's what I need to trust in. And so I can honestly say that I had this sort of peace that surpassed understanding. I came home. By the way, he pulled me out of commuting between two of the US's first hotspots, Seattle and San Francisco. And I got to spend some time with my family. I'm going to pause here and just say it's not that easy to have this kind of faith when something really challenging happens. And it's not because I'm a mature, measured Christian. I think it's just because I've seen the way he works time and again. And as I have experienced how God is always faithful, my own faith and confidence in him has deepened. I remember the very first time I took a step off the edge when God called me. He's always speaking to us, right? He's always saying something. It's more, are we listening and are we responding? We were at a church in Crossroads in Ohio, and the lights dimmed, and we were instructed to pray and ask for a number that God would give us. And we would then, when the lights came up, share with our partner. I remember we were just new graduates, deeply in college debt, and new professionals. And in this dark room, I got this insane number of $20,000. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. There's no way Minky's going to have the same, right? But well, the lights came up, and I looked over at him, and we both had these weird sort of half smirks on our faces. And on the count of three, we shared our number, and we both had 20,000. We're like, okay, we don't even have 20,000 to give. But if that's what God's saying, let's do it. And it's another talk to tell you how God blessed us through that. But that was the first day we stepped off the ledge and God caught us. We can only experience his goodness when we react to what he's saying. And then our own faith deepens when we see how he's always consistent and always good. Good defined as helping us become more like him and using us for his purpose. In addition to what is God saying, the next question is, how can I grow? So I'm home now in Seattle, shortly after my daughter's school is canceled. And so we look at this opportunity and say, where can we grow as individuals and as a family unit? We looked at Colossians 2:6-7. Just as you receive Christ Jesus, continue to live your lives in him, rooted and built up in him, strengthened in the faith as you were taught. We thought, we've always wanted to see the US. We've never done an RV trip. My daughter's grown up in China. Let's rent an RV, just drive around socially distanced from a mobile home. When are we ever going to have this opportunity again? The RV was $50 a night. Within 2 days, we sort of picked our plan and started driving. What an incredible time of growth this was. I think this photo was taken in Oregon, one of our first stops. We learned so much about ourselves individually, about the Changs as a family, and we got so much closer to God. When you're out in the desert, by the way, yes, he literally took us out into the desert in this time. You really have a chance to listen to him. And the last part of Colossians says overflowing with thankfulness, right? So not only are we listening to what God's saying and how can we grow, we're embracing a posture of gratitude. And when we do, we can't help but ask ourselves the third question: where can I contribute? When I think about contribution, this is about, we called this in our trip the trail of joy. We researched every of the states that we went to, and some of the states that we had originally planned but didn't go to. We talked about the Trail of Tears. We talked about a lot of iconic places in the US and moments. And we said, why don't we leave a trail of joy? So as we were driving back up to Washington and going through Nevada, that's where my parents live. Obviously elderly in a retirement space, so not ideal for social distancing, but we decided to share an impromptu concert, and that's what this picture is. I'll pause and say I don't have a deep relationship with my family. And one of these mornings in the desert, when I was doing my quiet time, I really felt God calling to me and saying, reach out to your family. This is the time to do it. And I thought, okay, I need resources. That was my human failing in my response. I wonder what book I should send them. What emails should I send to them? And, I asked my mentor and really good friend, Vivian. So do you have any suggestions? They're not believers. They're highly skeptical. They probably don't know a lot. And her reaction was, I'm not sure it's really resources. It's more relationships that God uses. And I thought, oh, she's right again. So I ended up reaching out to my parents. We FaceTimed for the first time ever. And we set up this impromptu concert. My daughter wore a mask. We stayed more than 6 feet apart, and we reached out to them. And I think that was the beginning of hopefully what is reparation, restoration, and an active relationship that allows us to bring Christ's goodness to them. I looked at Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So, in this turning point, I know it's not easy. I know it's easy to get focused on what we don't have, where we are concerned, um, and maybe more the voices that we're hearing in the news. But instead, if we ask ourselves, what is God saying to me? How can I grow? And where can I be contributing? I think we're going to be in a better place. But in order to ask these questions, we really have to adopt a Christ centered mindset. And I know that's not easy right now. When we go to this next slide, there are a couple of thoughts that often take over our minds, right? We call it a scarcity mindset versus a growth mindset. This first one, there's not enough. There's not enough money. There aren't enough jobs. There's not enough toilet paper. Sorry, Dennis, quick aside. So 3 people, 1 tiny toilet in an RV for 22 days, 5 rolls of toilet paper, okay? People, do the math. I think we're going to be okay. But that scarcity mindset really came to life, didn't it? In toilet paper and prepackaged chicken and whatever else kind of flew off the shelves. This picture that I chose is one that my daughter took of herself kind of holding her s'mores up. It was one of our first stops, I think maybe in Idaho. We'd been eating beans because they're nutritious and easy to pack and easy to cook in a small space. And she's not a fan of beans. And this night she was like, oh, s'mores, I never knew how good they were. And I said, is it hard? Is it hard missing like great meals that your dad normally cooks? Is it hard being away from home and living in a small space? And she kind of held up these s'mores and looked at this beautiful view of the lake. And she said, you know what, Mom? It's enough. And I thought that was a great mindset. It is. What we have, we are already tremendously blessed, all of us who are on this webinar right now. Looking at Matthew 6, can all your worries add a single moment to your life? So don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will bring its own worries. That is for sure. So how do we shift our mindset from there's not enough to there is plenty? The next mindset that we often fall prey to is, I fear for the future. This is very real right now. I don't have a job. I've been let go. Where are we going to get money? Where are we going to support our family? Can I afford my house payments? And I don't want to diminish this at all. This picture my husband took of us, unbeknownst to us, as my daughter and I were walking. I think we were on a mountaintop in Utah. And I remember the conversation vividly. She looked at me, she said, what if school doesn't go back in session? I was like, babe, I got to break it to you. I don't think it's going to. I think you're done for the year. And because she's been raised in China, she immediately became anxious. She said, what about all those Chinese kids that are learning constantly? I don't have anything right now. My e-learning's at a minimum. I'm not going to be competitive. Yes, she's 11, and this is the conversation we're having. I think she'll be fine. I said, we will take care of it. We'll make sure that we are supplementing education. This trip is a great example. And we'll make sure we get you what you need. And then she said, how are we going to do that? You don't have a job. Yes, yeah, that's true. But God will provide. We cannot adopt a posture of fear. And when we look at Matthew 6:25, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or drink, about your body, what you'll wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? So we have to just constantly center our minds on God and what he's doing, and having that faith that he has a plan. The last mindset is, I'm not strong enough. I can't do this. I can't homeschool. I can't juggle work from home and the kids screaming in the background. How am I going to get anything done when I'm not strong enough? My husband took this selfie when we were in, I think, New Mexico, and we faced this sort of fork in the path. And it said, most difficult. What a great sign, right? Great. And most difficult was to the left. And my daughter, who's very sensible and pragmatic, immediately veered to the right. She's like, peace, people. But we said, no, why not take the most difficult? This is our turning point. This is our chance to take the most difficult. How do you know what you're capable of if you don't stress and push your limits to understand? So we took the most difficult, and it was difficult. It was 5 or 6 miles of incredibly tough hiking, and she powered through it. I think it gave her confidence and it let her know what she's capable of. But ultimately, when we look back at who we are in Christ, it's not because we're strong, it's because we're open to letting the Lord do what he needs to do and have his way with us. And because he is with us, we are strong enough. I love Isaiah 40. I was just studying Isaiah this morning. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. So, taking a step back in this turning point, ask yourself, what is God saying? How can I grow? And where can I contribute? And remind yourself, grounding ourselves in the Bible, the one solid truth that there is enough, that we can face the future without fear. On the next slide, this is a photo my husband took as Lainey and I were huddled inside the RV, because I think it was somewhere around where you all live, New Mexico or maybe Arizona. We woke up to crazy hail. And we were worried. Can we drive through this? RVs are not delightful to drive. I'll tell you if you haven't done it before. We were worried these balls of hail were actually going to break through the windows. And then we realized we don't need to worry. This entire trip, it was changing constantly based on shelter in place. We wanted to respect all the state laws. So we really were living day by day. Don't know where we're going next, don't know where we're sleeping next, and just having a lot of faith in the experience. And John 14:27 came to mind that morning. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. Do not give to the world as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. God called us on this amazing mobile biosphere adventure, and we had faith that we should just keep going. So we continued to drive through a hailstorm, later through a snowstorm, later that day through a sandstorm. And if you click, this was where we landed. I think we ended up in Nevada. And this was our sunset by the end of the day. How good is God, right? So I just hope that you're encouraged today by hearing a little bit about our mobile biosphere trip. Everything from where God first spoke to me in our dream, when I was listening to what he was saying, to how we focused on where we can grow, what we could develop amongst ourselves in this unique time, where we can contribute, and a reminder that there is always enough and we can face the future without fear, because through Christ, we are strong enough. If you want to continue the conversation, or if there's anything I can do to help and support you, on the last slide, here are my contact information. Feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. What a message, even with what you started with, how the Chinese language is able to kind of help us connect this challenging time with a turning point. And is it Wei Ji?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure I got that right. And what an adventure. It sounds like you guys built a memory that's going to last a lifetime.
We did. And I think, that's another point real quick, Dennis. We are living at a really unique moment in time, especially for students, right? You're going to tell your kids about this time one day in the future, your grandkids. And you know what they're going to ask you is, what did you do during that time? So what's your answer going to be? What's your story going to be? How did you grow? What did you contribute? How did you make the most of this period? I think, it's always great to think about the end in mind. What's the story that you guys are going to tell?
What a great reminder. We did have a question come in from the audience. Says, Emily, what do you tell people that feel like God is not speaking to them in this dark time?
We were just talking about this the other day. Lainey, my daughter, was observing how we feel like, my husband and I, the Lord speaks to us differently. And she said, for you, Mom, it always seems to be the people around you. You'll hear the same message from multiple people who, sometimes they're not even Christians. And that has been a reinforcement to you over time. And I was like, gosh, she's really observant and she does listen. And for my husband, it tends to be more the word. And maybe it's reflected by the fact that I'm more an extrovert and he's more an introvert. But I think that's the thing. The Lord speaks to us through circumstances, through the word, through the people around us. And I think being sensitive to his voice is really important. He may not be speaking the way that you want, where you will physically hear his voice in a dream like that, right? That's never happened to me until now. But understanding his voice. I was thinking about this recently. I was talking to a friend who gets very involved with orphanages in China. And we were talking about how you can hear the Father's voice. And she was like, I don't hear him. I don't understand. Why isn't he talking to me? She's really frustrated. So I used the orphanage as an example. I said, think about those kids in there. Let's say one day this little girl's mother, her birth mother, comes into the orphanage and she says, honey, it's me. The girl would have a blank look on her face. She would have no idea who the woman is because she's never heard her voice before, right? We learn the voice of our parents because we hear it over and over. And right now, if I was out in a busy street and I shouted my daughter's name, she would know that's me and she would come running. That should be the relationship we have with our Father. And that should be the familiarity we have to his voice. When he speaks, we say, yes, that is my Lord. And I know he's speaking to me. And that familiarity can only come from hearing it over and over. And again, being responsive. And I think when we build that familiarity and trust, then we realize there are so many different ways that God can speak to us. And just being I guess, more open-minded about the different ways that he might be communicating with us. Sometimes, are we leaving enough space in our quiet time? Something that I adopted as a new practice out in the desert was I start my prayer by just completely being silent. I actually get on my knees, which is not something I've done before. I get on my knees and I put my hands out. Because how many times do we go to God? And what's the first thing y'all pray for? Could you help me with this? Could you bless me with this? Could you give me this? We go in saying, here are the things I want. And I realized I've never just gone to God and said, what do you want to say to me? That's when I heard the thing about my parents. So be careful what you ask for. But I think if we go with this posture of, what are you going to say to me? And whatever prompting you hear, act on it. Is it reach out to my parents? Is it open your Bible? Is it spend some time in worship today? There are all these different ways that God can engage with us, but we really have to be listening and adopting that posture of obedience before we can hear what he has to say.
Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to keeping in touch.
Definitely. Thanks for this opportunity. Be blessed.